The expectation of the organization is that we literally show up as heroes every single time with every single project. It requires like a heroic amount of effort and energy. I think resilience fatigue, right, is something that happens when real leadership like outsources the strategy piece of how we build things to just something silly like, well, we need grit, we need toughness, we need all this stuff. Like if your plan requires everyone to be heroic forever, then your plan is not designed well.
It's Slackers, unscripted business insight from two lifelong builders. Jaime and Jonathan are here to show you how big ideas travel across industries. Consider it your weekly companion on the path to better work and a better way of working.
All right. You know that moment when you're on a Zoom line, you're nodding along like, yeah, okay, yep, fine, got it. But inside you are thinking, I swear, if one more quick thing lands on my plate, I am going to friggin' lose it. That is not laziness. It's not weakness. It's not even burnout exactly. It's something called, maybe, resilience fatigue. It's what happens when you've been staying strong for so long that your nervous system is quietly unsubscribing from the list. And for leaders and operators, this hits different because a big chunk of the job is invisible. You're not just shipping work, right? You're doing emotional labor. You are steadying the room. You're translating chaos into momentum you can use. You're carrying a lot of uncertainty so that everyone else can keep moving. Which really just brings me to how we landed on this topic today, resilience fatigue. Jonathan, man, it's good to see you. We got here, right? Because your mom texted you, sent you a message after, I think, hearing the episode, reflecting on something, and she kind of said something to you like, I'm self-diagnosing, but here I am. Like, what did she say? How did we get here?
Yeah, this is fun. You know, it's like, it's always great to be at these moments in our life, right? And we're still, getting the guidance and feedback and advice from our parents. And so, yeah, I think, it's been so great for, all of you who listen and for those of you who reach out to be able to get some feedback and just like how people are reflecting differently on things and how they're maybe receiving some of this. And yeah, one of the conversations I had with my mom after, some recent episodes and just, I think we can all agree there's just a lot of dynamic nature of things going on in the world right now, some of which can be really difficult to process on a regular basis. And, so the conversation really started around, just what it feels like when things change on you so quickly and you're trying to invest in stuff very quickly as well. So whether that means you're putting in a lot of effort or you're receiving new information, the speed of that is coming at you faster than really you can deal with it. And as you mentioned, this resilience fatigue, it may be a term that somebody's heard a million times. It may be the first time you've ever heard it in listening to this. And really, it just kind of comes back down to the fact that the change that's presented to you and the fact that you have a very difficult time leaning into any particular task because the definition of that task or the priority of that task or a new task might arrive that's constantly replacing each other and getting redefined. And it's really difficult to lean in and go full speed when you're still not exactly sure what the next unknown thing and when it might hit you. And if it's hitting you fast enough, you just start to lose the ability to charge back up and be ready again. And really, one of the defining factors of this is that for the folks that are experiencing this, and to your point, it tends to touch on some of the best performers in our life, in our work, on our teams, because part of this is feeling like I can take this, I can do this, I can absorb this, I can make this work. And wearing that in the way you present that on your face and the way your actions are of just being somewhat stoic and being like, I'm not really showing the fact that this is starting to break me down a little bit. But the cracks start to form and you start just doing a little less good on some of the things you used to be really good at. Things that you used to not care as much about suddenly annoy you way more than it used to. And to your point, you're starting to unsubscribe from this. I have a very long list of things and I typically go really hard trying to get that list closed. And yet it just constantly changes. And so I feel like I'm perpetually working on the same set of problems, but the rules of solving those problems are constantly changing. And to a person, it can be a very fatiguing experience to the point where you may not even quite catch it, whether it's yourself that's experiencing it or someone on your team or someone in your organization or someone in your family or your network of friends, is that oftentimes you might see some of these little things, but it might hit them all at once when it finally is just too much to handle. And that's why I think it's important for us not only to talk about it, but because we look to our strong performers throughout our entire life, right? It's not just company, but the company's a big part of it. We look to those high performers to get us through the difficult times, to get us through the lean times, to get us to make the push. and they're always up to the task. And then sometimes you can lose track of the fact that maybe you're overwhelming them.
So full disclosure, I had never heard this word before. Not that that's like, worked anything, but it wasn't until you had shared that message from your mom that, you and I had a little back and forth online, resilience fatigue. I've never even heard that before. So, there you go. Click, click, click down the rabbit hole of internet things. And yeah, I was lost for a while just on the topic, but it was fascinating for all of those reasons. Not only because I think initially I sort of conflated the concept with like burnout or something similar. And they're definitely adjacent, like they're cousins, right? They're sort of related in there. But what you just said in there, I think is such a key distinction as we, as leaders and builders are kind of reflecting on how we operate in the world, how we try to do what we're trying to do and how we're trying to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. It's one thing to bring to the table the kind of energy that requires maxed out red line energy and effort from yourself or your teammates or people just kind of operating at like the red line, right? All the time. That's one thing. It's another thing to bring that energy to the table along with a constantly moving finish line, constantly changing directives, just a constant chaos around how we are operating in the world. And that's a unique, this concept of resilience fatigue, that being described as like this unique artifact of that dynamic. I had just never heard that before. So for what it's worth, I tried to do a little lookups, right? It's described clinically per, I believe, the World Health Organization as essentially the exhaustion that builds when people are repeatedly expected to cope, adapt, and air quotes here, right? Stay positive through prolonged periods of stress, especially when the stressors do not resolve, the pace never resets, and the goals and the outcomes are not clear. And then it sort of gets into like that burnout concept where it's like burnout, stress, chronic workplace stress. Certainly that's like in there. But boy, when you and I kind of riffed on this, it seemed really obvious that you were talking about an affliction. I'm sort of using that clinically. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Is it an affliction? But something that high performing leaders, operators, just high performing people in general seem really susceptible to, right? Because they kind of walk into a situation and go, yeah, I'll do it. Hand goes up. I'll take it. I'm here to do more. So it seems worth noting. It's why we wanted to, riff on it today. It seems worth noting that potentially there's something that could be going on within teams, even within yourself, that's handicapping your highest performing people. Maybe even you, if that's the high performing kind of person in that stew. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, it is unique in the sense of like, because this was fairly new to me too, right? Like, so I'm having this conversation with my mom and she's like, I think this is a thing, right? Like, I think I might be experiencing some of this. I did the same thing. I was kind of looked into it a little bit more and found some of the same ingredients that you did there, which is that, I think we spot burnout a lot faster. The monotony of an ongoing task that never seems to end can easily burn people out, right? Just pound this nail with this hammer as fast as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can. And at some point you're just going to burn out, right? Like I can't pound this nail any more than I do. I can only do this so often. But, when we look at this from the resilience fatigue lens, it's almost like you're out trying to set a personal record in a marathon and you got a little earbud in and every couple of minutes they're like, yeah, we changed the finish line's in a different place and the route is actually different now. So you're going to need to take a left up here instead of a right and then just follow the signs until you hit the end and just keep going. And then every couple of minutes, they're like, nope, it's on the other side of town now. So, at some point, you're going to be like, I'm done running as fast as I can. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what are we doing here? Well, it sounds kind of silly. I think many of us may feel like we've been in that situation in our life and in our works, maybe a lot, where you're being asked to run really, really fast, but the destination's not super clear. The route is not super clear. And for all you know, you're running in exactly the wrong direction as fast as you possibly can. And that starts to feel a little deflating, right? Where it's hard to find the, why am I doing this kind of stuff? Now, if you're an elite performer, sometimes we've talked about on this show, right? Like there's usually not a shortage of work. If you want to raise your hand and get work, work's there. And we encourage that as a way to stand out. But that's also a way for us to start taking on maybe more than we can handle. And depending on what kind of culture we're a part of, and if the culture is like, get it done, if that's the culture, like get it done, and also accept the chaos. If that's part of the culture, like, hey, we know, so-and-so rolls in here a couple times a week and, flips everything on its head and we thrash around and then we get realigned and we go again. And that's how we do it around here. Okay. That might be, but if you're aware of that as like an existing culture and you're aware of the fact that we want to load people up and let's let the elite performers take all they can and run with it and do all these things, we can't be blind to the fact that they might be struggling somewhere. And sometimes even the very nature of those folks is to not raise their hand and say, I'm struggling. It's to kind of solidify the presentation of just being like, I'm okay. I am okay. But for us to take advantage of that and be like, well, they're fine. They're fine. Let's just keep loading them up. Like, we'll keep changing directions. We'll keep doing the thing. Like, we're not going to change. We're just going to encourage the people who can handle it to handle more. And then oftentimes you'll see people get surprised when an elite performer just checks out. They're like, I'm done. I've had enough. And nothing you can say can bring me back because I have reached my absolute limit of my ability to deal with this anymore. And those are the points where, you're breaking people, or they're getting broken as being part of your organization or part of your team. And it may not be the intended outcome, right? Like, there's not too many people that want to just break people, right? What you think is like, I got somebody who can lift a ton of weight. Let's give them a bunch of weight. And then forget that, we're not telling them how many reps or what kind of machines to use. Like, they're just signing up for like, yeah, I can lift 2,500 pounds. Like, great. We're going to give you the ways you're going to have to do that 10 different times throughout the day. And at some point you say, sorry, man, I'm not listening to you anymore.
What I love about what you just touched on, it makes me think, like, how can a leader kind of self-check or run an audit on their own team and organization, this week? How could you do something this week, today, whatever, to kind of reflect on some of this? And one of those pieces you just mentioned made me think of heroic effort, like a culture of heroic effort. I could certainly relate personally to that type of constant culture where the expectation of the organization is that we literally show up as heroes every single time with every single project. It requires like a heroic amount of effort and energy. I think resilience fatigue, right, is something that happens when real leadership like outsources the strategy piece of how we build things to just something silly like, oh, we need grit, we need toughness, we need all this stuff. Like, if your plan requires everyone to be heroic forever, then your plan is not designed well. So, I mean, that's something worth reflecting on. You go just look at your plans. Like, is that really what we've got? Especially if you're in senior leadership, right? Because some of the folks at the top, I think about, I know I've mentioned her before, somebody who was a mentor to me when I started off in radio, who was a SVP of sales. She was amazing. She was incredible. It was so clear to me early on that even like her, her title was one thing, SVP sales, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. She was really like chief, like nervous system regulator for people. I mean, she had to deal with every like salesperson. And I remember thinking so often, I'm like, dude, this is therapy for people. She was there for them. She would take those to me. I mean, she didn't take everyone. I mean, I remember plenty of times asking to chat. No, Jamie, not time. So, I mean, she must have had some discipline around saying no, which I feel like maybe that's another nugget of, what can you do with this information? It's probably how good are you at saying no, perhaps? I'm making this up. Maybe that's somewhere in there, but she certainly seemed to reflect that she had the ability to say no to certain things. But I watched her absorb an enormous amount of other people's anxiety, ambiguity, nervous energy, stress. And that's often the job of people in senior leadership. It's worth acknowledging that if that's going on a lot, maybe there's something to be done. Step one, just sort of see it.
It's familiar, right? I mean, throughout my entire career, I've always felt like I served as some level of therapist, right, in the organization and with your team and everything else. Is like sit down and be like, look, I need to unload some stuff here. Like and not even that it's a lot of complaining or demands or anything else, but sometimes it's just a matter of like validating that some of these fears and concerns and stressors are just real. And like, is there an end to these things? And like, sometimes just getting a little bit of reassurance that this isn't the plan, right? Like if you're not having a great day or it hasn't been a great week, that it's not like the intended outcome for you to feel that way. Like, and sometimes I think it can feel like that at certain organizations is like, this is just what they want. And while that may be the case, I mean, there's plenty of places that are, highly leveraged and demand people to just crash, leadership philosophies out there that are manage people to failure and fatigue. And that's why you'll know where their limits are. But that's really stressful for people to be managed that way. Right. And so
that's the Thunderdome approach. I mean,
yeah, it is. It's like
formal, it's a technical name for that.
Yeah,
approach.
That's exactly it. It's like, hey, Jamie, I need you to write me a 12,000 page document that's due by the end of the week. And you're like, dude, I only made it to 8,000. Like, great. I didn't think you'd get to 6. Right. And yet you feel like a failure. And I feel like I got more out of you, and somehow that's supposed to feel like victory, but it usually doesn't.
Oh, dude, I've been in the meetings where the CEO, the chairman and CEO is saying to the senior leadership team, hey, I'm bringing in these 2 or 3 or 4 individuals who all occupy the same functional role based on their functional title. I'm just going to kind of see who comes out on top with full body contact. I'm going to bring them in and just let them go at it. And you're sitting there thinking, holy moly, okay, that's an insane commitment to energy. And I hope that is as productive as you hope it is. But I mean, yeah, to your point, people have different styles. I don't think there's anything potentially wrong with, some Jack Welch Six Sigma type of approach to how you run a team. If we're all out here building, pacemakers, at that level of critical, then yeah, it should be Six Sigma perfect with whatever it takes. But I would challenge all of us to reflect, like, is that the kind of work we're doing? I'd certainly know it was not the kind of work we were doing on those teams when we were having those types of conversations. And I think the output of that is pretty toxic when you're not at least flagging some of that stuff and seeing that.
For sure. And I think it's interesting you bring that up, because we talk all the time at different companies and different organizations about when you show up for the day, are we creating something that's a life or death situation, or are we not? There are jobs like that. You mentioned it, right? Like if I'm a brain surgeon, I don't get a whole lot of leeway on whether I do a good job today. I need to do my very, very best brain surgery every single time, right? Like that's just how that goes. But usually those are very focused efforts as well, right? Which is that now you might be inclined to burnout in a role like that, which is we have a very, very specific goal that we're trying to achieve, and everybody's laser focused on that thing. And we might have to push really hard, maybe a lot, to go achieve that goal. But if we're out there making pacemakers, we're not getting distracted by recycled robots and like other things. Like we're like, everybody's focused on making the best pacemaker, guys. We got to do this right. And so, yeah, that's where I think you can get into those lanes where maybe burnout comes into play, because you're running hard. Everybody's laser focused. You have a task you have to complete. There's very little distraction on it. It's just go hard, right? And you either make it or you don't. And then the flip of that coin, which you say, they're adjacent to each other on the resilient side of thing, is just feeling like you're getting jerked around all the time. This is the way, this is not the way. This is the way, this is not the way. And it's hard to lean in and really give all your energy when that is waiting for you at the next turn, which is we're all planning to go left up here, guys. And right when we get ready to do it, everybody tells us to go right instead. Eventually you're back right where you started again. And everybody's wondering, like, are we really doing this? And that's where I think you have to look, one, being aware of those kinds of practices. And we all go through it. Like there's times of uncertainty. Sometimes we have to run hard. Sometimes it's important that we make quick decisions that are different. We have to be able to do those things. But part of this is really recognizing when you're just overdoing it, right? Like resilience is a thing, right? Like resilience is essentially like your ability to keep walking forward while you keep taking arrows. But at some point we're like, maybe we shouldn't keep shooting these people with arrows. The fact that they're capable of getting to the castle with 9 arrows lodged in their body somewhere. Yeah, they're super resilient, but maybe unnecessary. Like maybe we didn't have to do that, right? Like
that is so key.
That becomes so important, right? As at some point you see somebody walking toward the castle that's already got a couple arrows in them. You're like, hey, maybe could we help you? Like, do you not know the way where nobody's shooting the arrows? Or like, what do we need to do to help you out here? But not just be like, man, that Jaime, he can take 15 or 20 arrows before he gets to the castle. It's incredible. But let's go send him out there again and see how he does. Like it's, I know that people feel this way, and yet sometimes we just do it, right? We're just like, all right, well, I survived last time, so I'm going to try this again. There are some prescriptive things we can do for ourselves, for members of our team, looking at across our organization, where we can be a little bit more proactive. Because the last thing we want to do is get stuck in this kind of an environment where you have some people who are unaware that the environments even exist, and the other people who are just dealing with it. And usually the breaking point is kind of severe. These aren't always the things that you just smoothly navigate away from once somebody has reached their limit. Oftentimes, this is kind of like the end of the game for folks when they get to the point where I'm so fatigued in this area at this point, and I've been doing it for so long that I've lost trust in your ability to even give me concise direction so that I can use all the horsepower that I have. And at this point, I just feel like everything I'm being told to do is just really just wasting the energy that I've got, and I could maybe go apply this somewhere else.
As a total aside, it's really hard. I can't remember if it's like Lord of the Rings or like Braveheart or something, or like, I feel like every movie has some version of the scene where the dude has way too many arrows in him than like he should humanly have in him. Like that's a very hard bit. So as you said, Jaime is storming the castle. Look how many arrows he can take. My first reaction was like, yeah, that's a lot of arrows. It's pretty cool. And I thought, oh, that's terrifying. You're right. And maybe it's from one of those movies. I have a very clear cinematic Hollywood image in my head of all the arrows in the world. Something this makes me think of, and I guess it's probably worth acknowledging, and you hit it a little bit. I think we kind of have to drink our own Kool-Aid a little bit with this topic, because on this show, we certainly advocate for doing the emotional labor. For doing the emotional labor that is required of people in leadership positions to do and deliver meaningful, great work. especially as we've touched on before in other episodes, in an age of AI, right? In an age of AI, your ability to do the emotional labor uniquely qualified for humans is a differentiator. It's a competitive edge to be able to show up and have that extra bit of uniquely human value that isn't going to come from just a high performing, computer of some sorts to do something. So we advocate for taking that posture in the world. And we certainly advocate for building resilient people when we talk about, you and I talk about the activities our kids are involved in. And both of our kids are in youth sports, and a big part of the culture of youth sports, at least if we find ourselves able to kind of live in this type of a culture and deliver it, is about, are we helping to shape young, resilient people who understand that, why do we fall down? So we learn how to pick ourselves back up. There's a lot of value in doing these things. So I certainly have to just be aware of, we don't want to broach this topic to try to say, hey, shy away from doing the emotional labor, shy away from investing in growing as a resilient person. No, those things are important. They're valuable. Just be aware that perhaps this concept of resilience fatigue is a unique kind of tax for people that do sign up for sometimes the most meaningful work there is to do. That's not nothing. I think it's important that we kind of mark it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point, right? Because in so many things, it really comes to moderation, right? Like anything, you can aspire to do great work and be flexible and pliable and resilient and give it everything you have. But there's also understanding where you're kind of maxing out on that experience in some way. And in bursts, I think most good performers can handle that tapered and measured resilience of being like, I can lean in, I can go hard, I can be flexible, I can pivot really quickly, I can get stuff done, and then I can get more back into some kind of a routine or get some kind of a focused effort. And being able to charge back up and be ready for the next one of those that comes at you is really important. We don't get insulated by, change and disruption and all these things. We do have to kind of embrace it. Once it's starting to tax us, tax our work, make it harder for us to take on new things, starting to resent the stuff that you're already working on because it's creating too much conflict for everything else, that's when things start to fall apart. One of the ways you can look at that is just trying to assess, do I have more on my plate than I think I can do in the conditions I'm working in? At some point, you have to be, intellectually honest with yourself of saying, yeah, even as a strong performer, as somebody who views themselves as somebody who's resilient, as the person who never backs down, who always delivers, I'm going to do this. But also to be aware that I maybe have more on my plate than I can truly handle. And that if I get one more thing brought my way, it might be too many, might be one too many that I just can't even process anymore. And so you don't want to wait for that to happen where the next thing that gets dropped on your desk is the proverbial straw on the camel's back, right? You want to make sure that you're saying, my load is already taxing me right now, given the conditions we're in. All this uncertainty on all my projects, everything's changing all the time. No, I cannot take on a new project right now. I have to get, I have to lean into these things. I have to be able to focus on stuff. I'm being spread too thin. Like being able to raise the hand and say, yes, I've got too much, or no, I cannot take the new thing that just came up in the conference room that usually I'd be all over, right? Yeah, give it to me. I'll take it. But to be aware that maybe not. Maybe I've got the 13 things I've got on my plate right now are not only more than I can handle right now, but my willingness to take on yet another new thing and yet another new thing eventually is going to put me in a situation where I can't deliver that stellar work. And it's going to look like I'm underperforming now as an elite performer. And that's going to make me feel bad. And my team's not going to understand it. And all these things that start to be contributed to that. And then on the other side, as a leader, you have to check in with these folks because it is not in their nature to say, I can't take another new thing, or that last thing I took on Friday is more than I can take. I need to get one of these off my plate. That's not in their nature. And so you're going to have to look, whether you're talking to them in one-on-ones or you can tell that someone's kind of struggling with something and trying to approach them, is that if you had to let go of one project that you're working on right now, what would it be? Like, what's really bogging you down? Or what's the thing you feel like you just can't put enough time on and it's getting away from you? Like, what's that? Like, maybe we can find a way to reallocate that, or maybe I can get that off your plate. Addressing that up front, one, it gives that person a chance to reflect on themselves. Like, do I have too much on my plate? Like, maybe I do. I'm just going. Or no, I really am okay because a couple of these are going to roll off, the next week or so. I'm good. Thank you for checking in. Or, you know what? Now that I think about it, yeah, the one thing I picked up last week that I thought I had bandwidth for, I just don't. And if I can't get this off to somebody else, I'm worried that my work's kind of going to suffer, or that I'm just not going to feel like I'm doing my best. And take that opportunity to relieve that pressure in that moment, which, again, goes back to trust and culture and a lot of things we've talked about before. It's important that it's not just left to idle until someone just checks out.
Dude, I love that you got really specific in that example there with like the follow-up question to the team member. I mean, that just screamed to me like there's a tactic, because there's such a huge difference in checking in, whether it's you got a scheduled one-on-one on the calendar or something like that, or it's just a casual, it's a hallway thing or over whatever. Such a difference between, hey, like, how you doing? I'm fine. Versus, hey, what's like one thing that's on your plate right now? I mean, you saying that right there just made me think, man, that's a great tactic. If you, as a leader, looking at your own team or you're reflecting on as a tactical thing to do is, let's generate that list of really specific questions. So we kind of don't leave ourselves open for the generalities and the response that perhaps isn't so helpful. Let's really try to get in there. And in many cases, besides giving you perhaps more helpful information, that's just like a safer question to respond to. I think as a recipient, like, hey man, how you doing? I'm fine. I'm supposed to be fine, right? We're all fine. We all just say fine. Just by getting specific, man, that's super helpful.
It's important to understand the dynamics of, how this kind of manifests itself for ourselves as we look at it. Like how do we feel when we're in this mode? And how can I tell if maybe someone around me is experiencing this in some way? And to your point, if you just go up and be like, hey, Jamie, I know you got a lot of work on your plate. You good? Like that almost sounds like your only answer to that question is yes, right? Like it doesn't feel like you're being put in a situation to say, well, you know what? Now that you mention it,
100%.
Yeah, I got this one thing I picked up last week, and I'll tell you, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get that done. Like that does not feel like the opportunity to say that, right? And yet, a lot of times, that's how we do our, our little check-ins, our pass by in the hall, or at the end of the meeting, or whatever, is be like, hey man, it looks like you got a lot going on. Are you okay? Are you good? You going to be able to get this done? And it's like, kind of feels like the only answer to that question is yes, right? Because it doesn't feel like you've really have the door open. And so you do have to be, I think, a very earnest in the sense of, if you're going to ask the question, is that you got to frame it in a way that gives them an opportunity to say. All of us have enough on our plate right now that there's one thing that we're probably not being able to pay as much attention to as we like, or one that we took on that maybe we don't think we can do. Or if we had to prioritize them, we could certainly do that. If you got 6 things on your plate, like what's number 6? Like what's the one that's just kind of hanging out there? Like there's an answer to that question. That is not qualitative, like, no, I'm good. It's what's number 6 on your list of 6 things, Jamie? Like, is that one getting enough attention? Tell me about it. Whatever that might be, that so you can kind of get a better understanding. That way, those folks start to learn that, one, when I'm being asked those questions, it's an opportunity for me to say, yeah, I need a little relief here somewhere. Or knowing that if I say the number 6 thing is not something I can pay a lot of attention to right now, and it might get taken away, and I'm like, I can actually probably get that done. Like, you start to understand, like, what's being asked of you is, have we given you too much with too little direction? And now our expectations are sky high, and you're finding that that's stressful and frustrating. And that's putting you in a position where I don't know how to succeed in that role anymore. And no matter how hard you work, you don't see an outcome that says, I'm going to move through this, because there's not really a great way to say these 4 projects who have constantly being redefined and have a tremendous amount of pressure to get done, and it's all on you. You're never going to feel like you're in a position to succeed.
I think another thing that comes to mind as far as a tactical piece of this as person in leadership could take is, you also kind of maybe got to rethink about how much you want to like celebrate those like 2 a.m. wins, right? The hero moments. I mean, yes, sometimes that's what the task requires or the job or the project requires, and we do that. And you do have to celebrate those wins. Those are big deals. But if those are the only flavor of wins that get celebrated, that sort of starts to create a culture of, oh man, around here, the only thing that gets praised is being the constant hero, the 2 a.m., 3 a.m. win. Where are we celebrating the really well-documented piece of information? Documentation gets celebrated. A handoff gets celebrated. You sort of start watering these other areas of behavior that you value as an organization, because you've got to start letting people know that the time to decycle or to be organized and hand off, to package something up to be distributed and shared so that that a load can be shared and carried by multiple people, that those things are celebrated too. So just expand the menu of wins, I guess, is what I'm proposing, perhaps like beyond just like the 2 a.m. we're all a hero here at 2 a.m. because we shipped the thing and published the thing. I realize that I mentioned a word, I've said it a few times, and so have you, mentioned the word emotional labor. And I'm thinking about maybe just kind of rolling the tape back a little bit on that word, because I think you and I have talked about maybe even doing a whole episode on this topic. In case anyone, listening is not familiar with that term, it's a very real thing. I believe it goes back to, it's conceptually, it's I think rooted in like the 60s, maybe early 70s. Arlie Rothschild is the kind of mind behind it. She was speaking at the time about the very specific type of labor that people in service industries were asked to do. So think flight attendants, the server at the restaurant, the person who, regardless of if they are having a good day or a bad day, you as the customer expect them to bring you the drink and have a smile on their face and bring you the extra packet of peanuts and get you extra napkins. And that was the label used to describe that type of labor, as distinct and different from, I move heavy boxes from this side of the room to the other side of the room. Just acknowledging that emotional labor is real, it's valid, and it's heavy to carry. So I'm mentioning that just because we're talking about that type of labor that we believe really high performing people are able to do on behalf of their teams and on behalf of the organizations that, they work for, or they represent, or even themselves. Besides kind of just, getting back to that as a description, I also want to acknowledge that you and I are talking about this in the context of business primarily so far. But you and I, we're not bringing this topic up today because you and I are like therapists. We're not trying to have like necessarily like a mental wellness show right here. Like this is a performance issue. And really that's what drops out the bottom of not tending this topic. At least that's our assertion, I believe, is that this is a performance issue. So if you frame it that way, then it's really easy to understand that lots of other industries build in down cycles intentionally. I mean, we love baseball in this house. There is not a pitcher in the MLB that does not understand as a starting pitcher, let's say, when they go that week, how important the off time is and how much gas they got in the arm. I mean, you hear that pitchers only got X number of pitches in that arm for their lifespan, right? It's a part of the game. The game it's built into. It's the same thing in creative work. I can't tell you how many musicians and artists that I talk to who are just grinders when it comes to touring and they're out on the road constantly. But all of those efforts, they have intentional downtime built into those cycles as well. Or just from like you think of like a release cadence. If every week is like album launch week, your whole nervous system collapses. You can't. So I think of that kind of performance component of this topic because I want to kind of challenge anybody like listening to kind of stretch that definition around some other areas of their life where you might look around and realize, oh yeah, there are other places where they're simultaneously saying, no, building resilient people is important and valuable and we need that. But part of what we do to support that over time is we intentionally build in guardrails, down cycles, other systematic things to allow our team, ourselves, our individuals, our pitchers, our guys in the band, whatever, to recover. So that's another thing I think about. Like, what does recovery look like for a team, a professional team, an organization? In fact, maybe I'll kind of put that to you because you see so many different business verticals by virtue of the people you get to work with. I mean, can you think of an example or just a moment where you're like, man, that's a pretty awesome example of how they've just built in recovery into this whole process?
Yeah, I think, one example where I saw it's difficult to keep in practice because we have an appetite for, aggressive work. But I worked with one organization where they had a pretty strong cadence of products, product releases, product building, constantly working. And yet every time one of the teams would finish a major milestone, everybody took a break, let off the gas a little bit, took some time, do the postmortems. Let's make sure we got the definition right for this next phase, but we are not in crunch mode. Like there's literally people taking PTO. There's other people just taking some breaks. We're kind of gearing back up to try again, but it is not go right back into full throttle mode at midnight the next, that day when you finally accomplish something. You mentioned the wins and celebrating and what parts we celebrate, but I think that part that you touch on there is really critical, which is we start building our cultures of go hard, be ready for everything, and create resilient people, create resilient workers. But part of that promise has to be that we won't take advantage of them either, right? Like we don't build people up with resilience so that we can go crush them with their inability to take on unlimited amount of work. So it's important that if you're demanding or creating or asking work of people and they are subscribing to it, and they are resilient and they are willing to push and they are willing to go, the extra mile or be the 2 a.m. hero or whatever the thing is, that doesn't just become so common that you expect it and that just becomes the standard of work, right? Because at that point, what you're doing is you're you're purely just taking advantage of somebody's willingness to just go hard with a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And it's just unreasonable to ask somebody to go really hard with a lot of uncertainty for an extended period of time and not have a negative outcome. It's extremely difficult to manage that. And so I think, the other part of that is a lot of this has to align with our expectations, which we talk about expectations a lot. It's a really important thing for anything. It's just aligned expectations typically mean good outcomes. But, when we get into this, a lot of times we're saying we have a limited amount of definition, but we have a really high expectation of execution. And when that starts to happen, you're setting yourself up for almost creating this kind of an affliction across your organization. As you're saying, like, we don't really know what we're doing, but boy, we sure expect some awesome things to happen when everybody gets in here and does it. While that can pop its head up, occasionally, that cannot be the way that things are. And this is a great symptom. If your organization, if you got people, especially top performers, you got top performers in your organization that are exhibiting symptoms of this. Their fuses are short. Their work is starting to suffer. Their focus isn't there. It's quite likely that you have created very poor definitions and expected everyone in this group to exceed expectations. While you might want to surround yourself with resilient folks, you might want to create resilient folks, you want to build teams of resiliency, you want to build resiliency into your culture, then you have an obligation to provide clear guidance and direction so that you can, expect, demand, ask for that level of performance because the instructions are clear. Because when the instructions are not clear, your expectations of wild success need to be tempered.
Man, I was trying to scribble notes while you were talking here because it made my brain go two places. It made my brain kind of go to, okay, if I'm listening to this show, let me try to organize my thoughts around, all right, what are the traps, guys? Like, what are the things that you guys are saying are the things to look out for? What are the symptoms? What are the things, where the lamp, whatever the metaphor is. And I'm hearing things like permanent urgency, right? Everything is labeled critical, so nothing's believable, right? Hero incentives, that's the 2 a.m. thing. That's what we reward, and it requires heroic effort for everything we do. Open loops, too many open loops from leadership. Too many well, we'll see. When we get there, we'll see. So too many open loops, decisions that just don't get made. That emotional labor defaulting to just a few people, like one manager becomes the shock absorber for everybody, right? That one person is like the emotional sponge for everybody else's anxiety. And then kind of like mission or purpose or whatever as like the permission to do the job, meaning like meaningful work becomes, and maybe that's what I'm hearing when you were just talking there, like we do meaningful, important work here becomes like the permission slip to overtax people, to abuse people, and to misuse like resources, because you wrap it in this narrative of like, but we're doing such meaningful, important work, so therefore it requires this of you. It reminds me of the very end of like the Bourne movies. There's one of them where like he's about to get shot off the roof, and he's like, look what they make you give. Like it's sort of like that thing where he gets like shot, like falls in the river. Anyway, there's a tangent for you. But at the same time, then it's okay, if those are the traps, guys, like what am I supposed to do? Like what am I supposed to do? Because I'm thinking of, even if I'm an individual or I'm part of a team, what are some things I could maybe do this week? What can I do today? I think as an individual, and this is where I have some of my favorite conversations with creatives when I'm working with artists or musicians or kind of, coaching and consulting at that level, you have these conversations with somebody who's like a party of one or, a party of like, just a few people. And it's a fun exercise to kind of do like an emotional labor audit, even for individuals, to kind of just sit down and be like, hey, write down like the top 5-ish, whatever, like emotional labor like tasks that you've done this week. So those are things like, how many times are you calming somebody down? Like how many times are you translating conflict, right? Like how many times are you reassuring the customer, the investor, the executive, the board, or whatever? How many times are you carrying all the anxiety or uncertainty that a team has? Motivating people when you don't feel like it. That's a big one. So I think like that right there, there's one exercise. Sit and maybe just kind of audit how much of that you're doing in a week. That's kind of a nice thing to just see like on paper. With team culture, like what do you do if you're kind of looking at going into work, this next week and thinking what you do on behalf of your team? I'm hearing things like you got to kill some sort of like fake urgency thing. Something in your stack of urgent can't be real. So you audit that, and it's like, what is like a reoccurring meeting that probably doesn't need to be a reoccurring meeting? What is some version to like consolidate updates or things that are, constantly on the calendar into like some sort of like asynchronous Google Doc or something, or always just like the always on pings that everyone gets all day long for something. Are there ways to reduce that? I mean, that's kind of one, that kill urgency thing. And then I think of the how do we kind of de-hero-fy our culture? Like that's the where's somebody who's demonstrated a great example of, we just avoided a huge landmine or a fire because we documented the process and we had an effective handoff. And because we did such a good job of documenting and handing off this real critical piece, we dodged a bullet. Where's that kind of celebration? Or we're praising the emotional labor, that time where somebody's going the extra mile to carry somebody else's tension or somebody else's effort, that as leadership and management, you're going, hey, thank you for doing that work. That was tough. We know that you had to carry that energy. You sat down through a tough conversation. That was worth something. We're going to celebrate that. That's where my head's going as far as, things someone could do today, this week, or whatever, if you really wanted to kind of bring this out of the clouds.
I mean, there's really two key things, the tactical things that you can do as an individual, or that you could do as a leader. It's just been which side of the coin you are on this. One of which is, like a self-assessment. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good am I feeling about taking on something new? Like how would I feel about being able to take on yet another new thing and today? And if you're at like, nope, I'm a how do you want to look at this? I got on my battery level. Let's say, how's my battery feeling for taking on something new? And I might be like, I'm feeling like 5%. Like my battery's low. It'd be really difficult for me to take on something new right now. And then I need to be aware of that, because when the new thing pops up, I need to be ready to be like, you know what? I probably can't take on a new thing right now. I need to be aware that the fact that my ability to take on something new right now is at a low, or sky high. Give it to me. I'll take it. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm not going to feel anxious about taking on this new thing. I got plenty of horsepower, plenty of gas in the tank. Let's go. But be aware of it through that lens, because as a high performer, your first indication might be like, give it to me, without thinking first of like, am I in a place right now where taking on something new is going to be okay for me, or am I going to put the rest of my stuff kind of in jeopardy? And then, like I said, as a leader, you can kind of look at it through the same lens. That could be part of a stand-up. It could be part of a one-on-one. It could just be part of a, hey, Jamie, how you feeling? Like, if I got some new stuff sitting around out here, you good for taking on, a couple things, or you feeling like you kind of maxed out? Tell me how you are as far as what's your appetite right now on taking on new stuff, so that we can figure out where we go on that. And then the other would be is just like, if you had to remove something, like if something is you're responsible for a thing right now, 10 things right now, whatever the number might be, and you could remove one of them that would make the rest of your ability to do these projects better, what would it be? And to look at it yourself and think like, you know what, I get this one project, takes a lot of my time. I don't feel like I'm making great progress on it. It's kind of sucking up my energy for my ability to do these other things. Maybe I can find a way to shift this over to someone who's going to take it and have more bandwidth to take care of it, whatever it might be. And as a leader, the same thing. Hey, Jamie, what do you got on your list today? If you could take one thing off your plate, what would it be? What would help you the most? And you might be like, I'm fine. Like I am good. But it gives you that moment to think about it. It gives somebody a chance to open that door. And if you're like, I have one thing that is extremely distracting and it's probably my lowest priority thing, it'd be great if there was a way for us to shift this out. And that might unlock you to the point where you're like, I'm good now. Like I've reset the meter. I'm not in distress anymore. And my rest of my stuff has just kind of got unlocked and I'm ready to go. But if you're not addressing those kind of through those two lenses, which is one is, what's my capacity for new work? And if I had to let something go that would speed me up across the board, what would that thing be? And just be aware of that, and as a leader, try and extract it as a performer, as a team member, as a contributor, be ready with the understanding where you are in those places. Because when the opportunity to pick up new work comes and you're already ready with I'm maxed out, no, or in those opportunities where like, I do have something I need to get off my plate. Can someone help me with this? It will keep you going in a way where you still feel invigorated and not defeated.
Now you have a really specific story. We've discussed it on the pod a little bit, but I mean, I would love to maybe just hear you kind of unpack the example of the individual who, again, felt like was on a trajectory. I think you have a story about someone who was like, hey man, we thought we were really kind of humming with you kind of leveling up into this seat and what's going on. And I think through no real fault, maybe specifically of anybody. I mean, this was somebody who was really struggling in that moment to the point where they were getting physically ill with something that was going on. I mean, could you kind of roll that back? Because I feel like that's such a great example of, and by the way, these things happen and sometimes they look like this.
Yeah, it's in that particular story, this is an extremely strong performer. always the kind of person who would just take on anything. When you look across leadership and you look across the teams, and they're like, that person, you come up with something, you need some help. If they can help you, they're going to do it. And that just became the way, right? And a lot of people kind of look at that as being, you can just pile on as much in this person as you want. They just always get it done. They're always doing great. They're always willing to do it. It seemed like a win. And yet the person taking on the task was really doing it because they felt obligated. I feel like I have to do this. Like somebody important asked me to do a thing, I need to do the thing. I have the ability to do this task, so I will sign up for it. Even if I don't have the capacity for it, having the ability for it got the hand in the air, right? Like I can do this, so I'll take it. I can do this, so I'll take it. And at some point, the capacity was gone in order to do that. But the obligation was still there for that person, of feeling like I have to raise my hand if someone asks for help or needs a thing, and I have the capability to do it, even if I don't have the capacity to do it. And then further to that, some of the things were just falling outside of just normal comfort zones, asking introverted people to do extroverted things or vice versa. And in this person's case, it was a highly introverted individual who was being asked to do very extroverted things and was saying, I will do it because I have capability of taking on this task, even though I don't have the capacity to do it. And I don't have the emotional capacity to do this. I'm so far outside of my comfort zone doing this that I am having a physical reaction. I'm getting sick. I cannot get out in front of people. I cannot lead these calls. I cannot do these things because it's so far outside of my comfort zone. And I keep subscribing to it because I think I'm supposed to. And yet it's literally making me physically ill. And to the point where it was finally like too much is too much. And then that was it. I need to leave. I can't be part of this organization anymore because I don't have the ability to not take on new things, and nobody has the ability to recognize that I'm in that situation. And so I have to go. And at the end of the day, that person hit their fatigue and beyond, into the point where, resilience had long escaped them. It was just feeling like I am completely defeated. I need a hard reset. And that means I need to step away. I need to recharge my batteries completely, and I will, begin my task anew somewhere else. And you could look across and say everybody had responsibility in getting there, but it's very easy, especially in a corporate environment, to always load up the person who puts their hand in the air, who may not be thinking of it through the lens of their own capacity to do it well and to do it within their comfort zone, and to feel like I delivered the thing I signed up to do and I'm really happy about it. Is that they maybe are feeling I am obligated to do this because I am capable, and I will just keep saying yes until I completely break down. And that's where we have to be more aware of that ourselves, so we don't let ourselves get that far down the path where we do speak up and be like, this isn't the way. I can't keep doing this. And we also have to be, organizationally structured to identify when that's starting to happen, and then find the thing. Because I'll tell you, for that person, there was one very specific thing they said, if I could have just had this taken off my plate a couple months ago, I'd have probably been okay. And yet nobody knew what it was. And they were suffering through it silently. And so, in their case too, the emotional labor was show up for work and look like you're okay, right? Like, I'm going to pretend I'm okay all day long. And that in itself is entirely exhausting. Like, that's hard to do. And so, you're trying to be a person that's uncomfortable to be. You don't have the capacity to do the things you're signing up for. And at the same time, you're putting on a front that says, I'm all right. And that is incredibly exhausting and taxing. It doesn't produce your best work, and it doesn't help your team support you, but it also means that someone's letting you down on the other side by not identifying it sooner than that.
Yeah, that's wild. It's such a good story. I mean, to your point, it's a wonderful person. And the fact that you even have the opportunity to kind of, I don't want to call it, like a post-mortem, but just to even get that kind of valuable feedback after sort of the whole arc of a thing has come to completion is so insanely valuable. This is not like a direct line into kind of what we're talking about here, but while you were talking, it just reminded me of, so one of my kiddos who, well, I say kiddo, he's a teenager, but okay. So one of my kids has really serious food allergies and was diagnosed really early, like as like a year old essentially. And I remember early on, my wife kind of getting jumped into these food allergy and allergy support groups from our pediatrician, kind of connecting her with people. Hey, this might help, because you carry around all this anxiety. And I remember she went to a meeting, and she went to one and came home and just said, hey, James, like I can't go anymore. I can't do anything. I understand what these women are trying to do, but honestly, it's just like everything they're describing and is like they're watching their kid play on the edge of a cliff all day long. And he's not going to fall over, but he's not on the edge. And he's just on the edge all day long. And they just sit with that all day and have to kind of operate. So not exactly the same thing, but that sort of just sprung to mind. I just imagine like that is a unique type of exhaustion. I can also connect that story. I mean, my professional life right now, the company where I am, I mean, man, we are living in the trenches constantly of chaos and constantly moving goalposts. And we're a super lean team, and we're constantly being asked to do, the heroic work every single time people show up. And what we've realized, and myself and a few others, when we are being tasked with keeping a team, a very small team together to, again, continuously deliver what many would consider just an insane amount of work, given the resources that we have to get it done. And here's what I realized. I'm coining an acronym. I've never done this before. I'm coining an acronym. Here we go. Watch this. We had to, myself and a few others, we kind of had to put a framework together around, well, how are we going to do this? Like, how are we going to keep everybody on this bus kind of together trying to move this thing forward, given the unbelievable constraints and challenges and so on and so forth. And it's not a great acronym, by the way. It was CRM, like your CRM, but we put an L in front of it. So LCRM, your load CRM. That's what it was. So maybe it's not an acronym. Damn it. Maybe I failed at bringing an acronym to life. I'm close. But the idea was this. That was a structure that we could run through as a team when we were approaching a product or a project or a Herculean task that had to be, delivered in some insane timeline. Was you would run through this. L, load. What is the business asking people to carry? Like, what is the actual load? Let's define it. We got to say it out loud. What is the hidden load, right? What's the unresolved conflict, priorities that aren't clear, unclear definition, all that sort of stuff. And really, we just had to go, what load have we normalized that would look like insane on paper? We do that all the time. But perhaps we've normalized it here in this environment, and that's dangerous. So that's the L. Then capacity. You mentioned it right there. Capacity. What can the team actually hold, right? Like, capacity can be a number. What is ours right now? For real, versus what are we pretending that it is? And then recovery. Here's the part where we are horrible at this. In fact, it doesn't even really exist in many cases. But that's supposed to be, where is recovery designed into our week, into our work, into the cadence? Like, where does it sit specifically? Who's forced on PTO? Who's forced to take 2 days off? I mean, all that kind of stuff. And then the M, the meaning. And this kind of goes back to that emotional labor piece, we are still advocates for doing that kind of work because it's a value add to the world. It's needed. And that's the meaning. Why is this worth it? Right? Like, what is the mission here? What is the purpose? The why underneath all of this? Meaning is incredibly important to acknowledge, to mark, to say it out loud, and make sure we're all aligned on that. But, and you keyed into this earlier, right? Meaning is not an excuse for emotional overdraft for people. And that's what we do. And sometimes as leaders, we got to be mindful of that we're not using that as a trick. So there's my attempt at my first acronym. Take it, Wikipedia. LCRM. It kind of sucks, but I tried.
I do think I appreciate all the effort that went into that. But I think dude,
you should see my notepad here, dude. I was scribbling while we're writing. I'm like, I got it.
Yeah,
here we go.
I know
we do these things. I just don't think I've ever packaged it up and tried to make
right
it something.
There. In all seriousness, right? Like, recovery is one that just nobody really gives the right amount of attention to. It's just not. Like, we are very good at asking everybody to go beyond their max, and we are very poor at asking people to take a break for a minute and recover. And we just have to be better at that, right? Like, that in general, as our work culture has always been, go 110% or whatever the percentage is that athletes they get into the thousands of percents, I think, these days. but going more than you feel like is possible for an extended period of time is going to fatigue just about anybody. And when you combine that with uncertainty, you're in a tough spot. And we don't necessarily understand our own capacity if we're not thinking about it. Sometimes those of us will just take, give me as much as you can, and not really think about how much work there really is to do and how much time there is to do it. And that can put us in a tough spot. And then not necessarily feeling like you have the permission or ability to get something off your plate. And when you have leadership that offers that, and when you have leadership that encourages recovery, and when you have team members and leadership that understand what, true capacity is really happening, and both sides are pretty honest about what they're dealing with and have an opportunity to talk about that, you can get in front of this. It doesn't have to be a crippling experience for, for an organization or for team members or individuals, wherever you might be experiencing this. It doesn't have to get to the point where it's complete failure, that the only option is completely ejecting from the situation and trying to find a way to reset somewhere else. Whether it's a term you've heard before, whether resilience, fatigue kind of resonates or not, the experience of what it is probably something we're familiar with, which is, really trying to go really, really hard with a lot of uncertainty for too long is going to break us down. And the more things we can do to relieve ourselves of that before we get to that point, the better. And as individuals, there's things we can do to get in front of it. As leaders, there's things we can do to get in front of it. And the one thing we can't do is just turn a blind eye to it and keep piling it on and keep expecting things from folks and keep letting people raise their hands and take on more than they can handle without really giving everybody a chance to just take a breath and succeed.
Amen, brother. That is it. I think that's the nail on the head. I think you landed the plane there. There is not a starting pitcher in the MLB, right, who throws 100 pitches in 6 innings and doesn't go for at least 4 or 5 days rest. Maybe they get lucky and they get 6, right? We've all felt it. You got to tell your mom, man, thank you for sending that message, because here we are an hour later because Jonathan's mom kicked the whole thing off. So shout out to Jonathan's mom. I hope wherever you are that you were absolutely a seed for a wonderful conversation. Jonathan, it's great to see you, man, as always. This is Slackers. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Jonathan.
Please check us out in the show notes. There are links to both of our work down below. Drop us a note. There's a link where you can leave us a voicemail. We've got some really interesting questions that have come our way. In fact, I think we might be headed towards like a Q&A episode coming up at some point in the future. So leave us a question. If there's something you want to ask us or know more about, we'd love to hear from you. Just say hi. We love it when people say hi. You can find us online. Thank you for listening. This is Slackers. We'll talk to you soon.